Imagine a morning in 1596, where dawn's first light spills over the hills of Miyamoto village, Harima province, bathing the rice fields in a golden glow, their green tips swaying like a gentle tide. The air carries the crisp scent of cedar from nearby forests, mingling with the warm, savory aroma of miso simmering in a neighbor's hearth. Cartwheels clatter softly on dirt paths, and a temple bell chimes in the distance, its low hum weaving through the chirping of cicadas. This is the world of Shinmen Bennosuke, a 13-year-old lad who will one day be known as Miyamoto Musashi, Japan's greatest swordsman. For now, he's just a boy with a wooden sword and a dream as vast as the hills around him. Bennosuke stirs on his tatami mat, the woven straw cool beneath his bare feet, its texture a familiar comfort. His home is modest. Wooden beams frame a low ceiling. A table holds a chipped rice bowl and a cup, and a faint whiff of ink lingers from his father's scrolls. The walls, weathered yet sturdy, seem to whisper tales of samurai ancestors, their grain etched with time. Outside, Miyamoto hums with life. Farmers trudge to fields, straw hats bobbing like lanterns, while a blacksmith's hammer rings out, steady as a heartbeat. It's a village where everyone knows your name, and Bennosuke's is already murmured with a mix of awe and doubt, like a breeze that can't decide whether to settle or stir. His father, Shinmen Musashi, is a man carved from the rugged stone of the mountains, a martial artist of repute. His face bears scars like maps of battles past, his eyes sharp but softening when they rest on his son. "Up, boy," he grumbles, his voice like gravel crunching underfoot as he sharpens a jutta in the corner, its metal glinting in the morning light. Munasai's hands, calloused yet precise, move with the ease of a man who's faced death and walked away whistling. He's not one for long speeches, but his rare nods of approval are worth more than a daimyo's gold to Bennosuke. Then there's Dorimbo, Bennosuke's uncle, a monk at the nearby Shorien temple. He glides into the room like a breeze, his faded robes brushing the floor, their edges frayed but dignified. His gentle smile contrasts Munasai's sternness, and his eyes twinkle with a wisdom that seems to see beyond the horizon. "Focus, young one," he says, handing Bennosuke a bowl of miso soup, its steam curling like a dragon's breath, the savory scent warming the air. A sword is only as sharp as the mind behind it. It's the kind of advice that sounds profound until you realize he might just be talking about breakfast. But with Dorinbo, you're never quite sure. And let's not forget Takezo, the village's resident loudmouth. A year older, he struts through Miyamoto like he owns every rice stalk, his laugh booming across the fields. His tunic, a bit too flashy for a farmer's son, catches the sun, and his bokken swings with a swagger that says he's ready to take on the world, or at least the local kids. "Think you can swing that stick, Bennosuke?" he taunts, leaning against a fence with a grin that's half challenge, half jest. There's a spark of rivalry there, but also the kind of bond forged in the dust of shared childhoods, where insults are just another way to say you're friends. Bennosuke's days blend work and training. Mornings find him in the fields, his hands sinking into the cool, damp earth, planting rice seedlings with a swordsman's precision. The sun warms his back, and the rhythmic rustle of stalks is a soothing counterpoint to his restless thoughts. But his heart lies in the dojo, a Spartan room with wooden floors and walls adorned with scrolls of samurai wisdom. Munasai is a relentless teacher, his voice barking commands as Bennosuke practices katas, his bokken slicing the air with a whoosh. "Faster, boy. Your enemy won't wait for you to think." Munasai's own sword moves like a dance, demonstrating a parry that seems to defy time itself. Training isn't just about swings and stances. Munasai teaches strategy, reading an opponent's stance, anticipating their strike before it's even conceived. "A sword is an extension of your mind," he says, his voice gruff but patient. "Sharpen your mind, and your blade will follow. Bennosuke listens, his young mind soaking up every word, his calloused hands gripping the bokken tighter, as if it could anchor his dreams. Evenings bring a different kind of lesson. Bennosuke visits Dorinbo at the temple, where the air smells of incense and polished wood, and the soft chant of monks drifts like a lullaby. Dorinbo's tales of Zen masters and samurai legends weave a tapestry of wisdom, patience, focus, the impermanence of all things. The world is like a river, always flowing, always changing, he says, his eyes distant as he sips tea. A samurai must flow with it, not fight it. Bennosuke tries meditation, sitting cross-legged on the temple floor, his breath a steady rhythm, though his mind often wanders to dreams of duels and glory. Takezo, meanwhile, keeps things lively. Their impromptu duels in the dusty courtyard draw a small crowd of village kids, their bokken clashing with a satisfying clack. "Show me what you've got, Bennosuke." Takezo laughs, his eyes gleaming with mischief. Bennosuke meets him blow for blow, their rivalry a spark that pushes them both to improve. Beneath Takezo's bravado lies a grudging respect, a nod to Bennosuke's skill that's as clear as the noon sun, even if he'd never say it aloud. Today, though, is no ordinary day. Word has spread that Arima Kihei, a wandering samurai of the Kashima Shinto Ryu school, has challenged any takers to a duel. Most would scoff at a 13-year-old stepping up, but Bennosuke isn't most boys. He's been training since he could toddle, his hands calloused from years of gripping a bokken. While other lads chase kites or sneak rice cakes, Bennosuke's chasing glory. It's a bold move, and the village gossips call it madness. But madness and genius often share the same tatami mat, don't they? The duel is set for dawn, in a clearing beyond the village, where the grass shimmers with dew, and the air smells of earth and anticipation. The first rays of sunlight glint off rice stalks like tiny mirrors, casting a golden glow. Bennosuke arrives early, his bokken slung over his shoulder, heart thumping like a taiko drum. Arima's suggestion of a nighttime duel raised suspicions, fishier than a week-old mackerel, and Bennosuke's no fool. He hides behind a gnarled oak, his breath steady despite the butterflies fluttering in his stomach. Arima Kihei strides into the clearing, his samurai armor gleaming with a polish that screams confidence. But he's not alone. A retinue of men, swordsmen, archers, even a few with rifles, creep into the shadows, their eyes glinting like wolves. It's an ambush, plain as day. Bennosuke waits, his young frame coiled like a spring, until Arima stands alone, katana drawn with a flourish. That's when he strikes. The duel is over faster than you can say samurai swagger. Bennosuke charges, his bokken a blur, catching Arima off guard. One swift strike, and the samurai crumples, his pride hitting the dirt before his body. The ambushers lunge, but Bennosuke's already moving, drawing a second bokken, his father's spare, and carving a path through the chaos like a painter with an aggressive brush. He slips into the rice fields, their stalks closing around him like a protective curtain, leaving his foes dumbfounded. Back home, the village buzzes with the news. Munisai claps his son on the back, a rare grin breaking through his stern facade. "Not bad, boy," he says, which is practically a love poem from him. Dorinbo nods, his smile serene as a lotus pond, murmuring about the warrior's path being one of balance. Takezo, lounging by the fence, tries to play it cool, but can't hide the respect in his eyes. "Guess you're not just a kid with a stick anymore," he mutters, kicking a pebble. "High praise indeed." The days following the duel are a whirlwind. Old men nod sagely, predicting a great future, while mothers cluck their tongues, worried for the boy's safety. Munisai intensifies training, his voice sharper now, sensing his son's potential. "Skill alone won't keep you alive," he says, teaching Bennosuke to read an opponent's intent in their stance, their breath. Dorinbo too steps up, guiding Bennosuke through Zen meditation, urging him to find calm amidst chaos. Be like water, he says, flowing around obstacles. Takizo becomes a regular sparring partner, their duels a village spectacle. You're good, Bennosuke, but I'm better, he teases, though his grin betrays admiration. Their clashes draw cheers, the clack of bokken a rhythm that binds them. One evening, as they rest, Takizo admits, "You might just be the best someday." Bennosuke laughs, wiping sweat from his brow. "I'll settle for better than you." As the sun climbs higher, bathing Miyamoto in golden light, Bennosuke sits by a stream, its gentle gurgle a soothing counterpoint to his racing thoughts. He's won his first duel, a feat most grown men wouldn't dare. Yet there's no arrogance, just a quiet spark of purpose. He's not just Shinmen Bennosuke anymore. He's the boy who'll become Musashi, the sword saint. And as the cicadas sing their endless song, you can't help but feel this is just the beginning of something extraordinary. For part 2, stay tuned to the Slumbering Times. If you enjoyed this, consider hitting like and subscribe. Thank you. 1604, Miyamoto Musashi stood at the edge of Miyamoto village, the familiar hills of Harima province fading behind him. 8 years had passed since his bokken struck down Arima Kihei, the samurai's fall etching his name into local lore. Now 20, Musashi felt a restless pull to test his skills beyond the village's quiet fields. The path stretched ahead, winding through cedar groves where the air carried the sharp scent of resin. Musashi's sandals crunched on gravel, his patched brown kimono swaying with each step. His dual swords, katana and wakizashi, hung at his side, their steel polished despite the road's dust. He walked with purpose, his hazel eyes scanning the horizon, seeking opponents who could challenge his skill and sharpen his craft. The memory of Arima's defeat fueled him, but it wasn't enough. He needed to face the best, to know if his will matched his blade. By midday, he reached a mountain pass, the air cool and damp from morning mist. He paused to tighten his hair's cord, his thoughts turning to his goal, to duel the greatest swordsman, like the whispered name Sasaki Kojiro, whose Nadachi was said to be unmatched. A sparrow's chirp broke his reverie, and he pressed on, the path descending into a valley where a river glinted under the sun. The road unfurled like a ribbon across Japan's heartland, each step pulling him deeper into its embrace. Sparrows darted overhead, their cheerful trills weaving through the rustle of leaves, while the gravel crunched rhythmically beneath his worn sandals. By nightfall, he reached a roadside inn, its thatched roof aglow with lantern light, the savory aroma of miso soup and roasted chestnuts curling through the air. Inside, travelers huddled over steaming bowls, their voices a soft murmur. Tales of bandits on the northern roads, a swordsman named Sasaki Kojiro, whose long nodachi was said to slice the wind itself. Musashi listened, his hazel eyes narrowing slightly, the name lodging in his mind like a stone in a stream. Kyoto loomed on the horizon, a city pulsing with life. As Musashi crossed its threshold, cherry blossoms drifted like pale snowflakes, their sweet fragrance blending with the smoky tang of grilled fish from bustling stalls. The streets thrummed with sound, merchants' voices rising in a melodic chorus, hawking silks that shimmered like liquid, spices that pricked the nose, and lacquered bowls gleaming in the sun. The clop of gaiter sandals on cobblestones formed a steady beat beneath the hum of temple chants, their incense curling skyward like a prayer. Musashi wandered, his road-worn frame drawing curious glances. Near a bridge over the Kamo River, he encountered Ren, a wiry street performer with a patched green tunic and a grin as wide as the sky. Ren juggled bamboo sticks with fluid grace, his movements a dance. "You look like trouble, swordsman," he called, tossing a stick Musashi's way. "Catch!" Musashi snatched it mid-air, twirling it like a bokken, earning a bark of laughter. "Trouble finds me," he shot back, his eyes glinting with amusement. Over a shared skewer of grilled eel, its salty richness a burst of flavor, Ren spun tales of Kyoto's hidden corners, rival dojos vying for dominance, whispered duels in moonlit gardens. The Yoshioka school's the big name here, Ren said, leaning in. Think you can take them? Musashi's smile was slight, his silence an answer. The Yoshioka dojo in Kyoto stands as a towering pillar of samurai tradition. For decades, this school has trained the elite, its name synonymous with the finest swordsmanship in Japan. Founded by Yoshioka Kenpo, a master under the Ashikaga shogunate, it has grown into a formidable institution, boasting over 100 students and a lineage of champions. The polished wooden floors gleam with morning light streaming through paper screens, the air heavy with the sharp scent of cedar and the faint musk of sweat from the gathered crowd. The walls are lined with scrolls detailing victories over rival schools, their ink faded, but their prestige undimmed. This is no ordinary challenge. Musashi, a lean 20-year-old ronin, steps inside, his patched brown kimono marked by road dust. His piercing hazel eyes scan the room, calm yet focused, his calloused hands resting on a katana in deep red and a bokken in soft orange at his side. His presence sends a ripple through the students, their murmurs rising like a soft wind. Seijuro Yoshioka, the school's head, steps forward, a stern, middle-aged master with a lined face and short black hair bound tightly. His dark blue kimono, crisp and formal, clings to his broad frame, his polished katana in rich gold raised in a high guard. "You dare challenge us, Ronin?" he snaps, his voice cutting through the tension. The crowd tenses, some clutching their practice swords, others shifting uneasily. Musashi meets his gaze, his expression steady. "Your skill is impressive," he says softly, his humility a quiet counter to the challenge. He draws his blades, the katana's edge glinting as he shifts into a low stance. Seijuro lunges, his katana arcing downward in a heavy overhead slash, the blade whistling through the air with force. Musashi's katana rises to meet it, the two steels clashing with a resonant clank that reverberates off the wooden walls, the impact jolting his arms. His wakizashi darts forward, a precise jab aimed at Seijuro's wrist, striking with a sharp crack that echoes in the stillness. Seijuro's grip falters, his katana slipping from his hand to clatter onto the floor, the sound a dull thud against the polished wood. The crowd gasps, a collective intake of breath, their eyes wide as mist hangs in the cool air, Seijuro's face twisting into disbelief, his hands trembling as he steps back. Days pass, the dojo's air thick with anticipation. Denshichiro Yoshioka, Seijuro's younger brother, storms in, a fiery figure with a broad jaw and intense dark eyes, his dark green kimono creased from exertion. His katana, held in gentle yellow, gleams as he growls, "This ends now." He charges, his blade sweeping in a furious diagonal cut aimed at Musashi's torso, the steel hissing through the air. Musashi sidesteps smoothly, his feet sliding across the floor with a soft scrape, the katana's edge missing by inches. He pivots, his bokken rising in a controlled upward block to meet Denshichiro's follow-up thrust, the wood absorbing the impact with a dull thud that vibrates through his grip. With a fluid spin, Musashi shifts his weight, the bokken arcing low in a sweeping motion, tapping Denshichiro's elbow with a crisp snap. The joint buckles slightly, and the katana slips from Denshichiro's nerveless fingers, thudding heavily to the ground. The dojo falls into a profound silence, the air dense with the warm musk of nervous sweat. The crowd's reactions swell. Students exchange stunned glances, some bowing slightly in respect, others whispering in awe, their voices a soft hum. Musashi lowers his weapons, bowing respectfully, and says, "Your strength has taught me much." His voice low and sincere, a mark of humility that softens the room's tension. The victories carve Musashi's name into Kyoto's lore, the dojo's stillness, a testament to his skill. The paper screens flutter gently, the morning light fading as the crowd disperses, their footsteps echoing into the distance, leaving only the scent of wood and the memory of a duel that echoes through history. The city hummed with his exploits, but Musashi sought no acclaim. By a temple garden, where koi drifted lazily in a pond, he met Yuki, a spirited archer with short black hair bound by a red ribbon, her leather armor etched with subtle patterns. "Fancy yourself a swordsman, eh?" she teased, notching an arrow with a smirk. They sparred in a nearby clearing, her laughter ringing as she danced away from his bokken, her bowstring twanging with each shot he dodged. "Not bad for a wanderer," she conceded as she lowered her bow. "Keep that blade sharp," she added, her dark eyes warm with respect. Their fleeting bond lingered in his mind, her wit a bright spark against the road's solitude. On a winding mountain pass beyond Kyoto, Musashi crossed paths with Jiro, a gruff merchant whose weathered cloak sagged with dust, his grey beard bristling as he adjusted his pack. "Heard you humbled the Yoshiokas," Jiro grunted, tossing him a rice ball wrapped in bamboo leaf, its salty grain a small comfort. "Any tales worth hearing?" he asked, settling against a rock. Jiro's gravelly voice spun warnings of bandit trails ahead, his practical advice steering Musashi clear of an ambush. Their shouts faded into the trees as he slipped away, bokken at the ready, but unbloodied. Through it all, whispers of Sasaki Kojiro grew louder, a thread weaving through every inn and crossroads. At a fire-lit tavern, a traveler's voice cut through the din. "Kojiro's Nodachi is a storm, never lost a duel." Musashi leaned closer, the fire's glow dancing across his scarred jaw, his mind turning over the challenge. Kojiro loomed on the horizon, a storm yet to break, their soon-to-be infamous duel a distant echo growing nearer with each step. Musashi trudged along a dirt road, the mud sucking at his sandals after a night of heavy rain. The air smelled of wet earth and pine, and the sky above was a dull grey, the sun hidden behind thick clouds. His kimono, patched from past fights, hung heavy with dampness, but his two swords, one long, one short, stayed dry under his careful watch. Word of Sasaki Kojiro, the master of the long Nodachi blade, had started to reach him more often now. A peddler he'd passed earlier that day had muttered, "Kojiro's unbeatable. His strikes are too fast to dodge." Musashi didn't reply, but the words stuck with him, a quiet challenge he couldn't ignore. Cutting through a dense forest where roots snagged at his sandals, their gnarled shapes a challenge underfoot. By noon, he reached a river, its banks swollen from recent rains, the water rushing with a low, steady roar. The wooden bridge swayed as he stepped onto it, the planks groaning with each careful movement, the wood creaking under his weight. Halfway across, shouts cut through the air. 3 men in tattered clothes blocked the other side, their clubs gripped tightly. "Pay up, or you're not crossing," one growled, tapping his weapon against his palm with a dull thud. Musashi kept walking, his pace steady. "Move," he said, voice flat. The leader swung his club, aiming for Musashi's head, but the swordsman sidestepped, grabbing the man's arm and twisting it until the club dropped. The other 2 rushed in, but Musashi drove his elbow into one's chest, sending him sprawling, then kicked the legs out from under the third. It was over in moments. The bandits scrambled off, cursing as they ran. Musashi crossed the bridge, brushing mud from his sleeve, and kept going. Days later, the sea came into view, its waves crashing against a rocky shore. He reached a fishing village where boats bobbed in the water and nets dried on racks. A man named Jiro, broad-shouldered and loud, was repairing a hull when Musashi approached. "Heard you're after Kojiro," Jiro said, not looking up from his work. "Good luck. That man's a demon with a blade." Musashi watched him hammer a nail into place. "I'll need a boat to reach him," he said. Jiro laughed, a deep, rough sound. "Take one of mine. Just don't sink it." He pointed to a stack of oars nearby. "Grab one of those too. Might come in handy." Musashi stayed the night, sleeping on a mat near the docks. The next morning, he picked up an oar from Jiro's pile, long, solid, and worn smooth from use. He spent an hour carving it with his knife, shaping it into a crude bokken. It wasn't steel, but it felt right in his hands, balanced and strong. The villagers watched, puzzled, but said nothing. As he worked, the sound of the waves filled the air, steady and calming, and Musashi's mind sharpened with focus. The villagers lingered nearby, their eyes tracing his every motion. A fisherman paused, net slung over his shoulder, and tilted his head. "What's he making?" he muttered. A woman with a basket of clams whispered back. "A weapon, maybe?" Musashi tested the bokken's weight, swinging it through the air with a soft whoosh. It was no katana, but its balance felt alive in his grip. Light, sturdy, unorthodox. The sun hung low, gilding the sea, and he rose, tucking the wooden blade under his arm. Jiro, the boatmaker, waited by a small skiff, his grin wide. "She'll get you there," he said, slapping the hull. Musashi nodded, stepping aboard, the boat swaying gently beneath him. The journey to Ganryujima was a quiet drift, the oar dipping into the water with a steady rhythm, the sea's breath cool against his skin. He had chosen to arrive late, a calculated ripple in Kojiro's calm. The island emerged from the horizon, its shore a jagged line of pebbles and driftwood, already crowded with onlookers, villagers, samurai, travelers, drawn by the clash of legends. As Musashi's sandals crunched onto the beach, the crowd parted, their murmurs rising like waves. He carried his dual blades at his hip, but it was the oar-bokken in his hand that drew gasps. "Wood?" a voice hissed. "He's facing Kojiro with that?" Another scoffed, half laughing. The tension thickened, a living thing, as Musashi's gaze settled on his opponent. Sasaki Kojiro stood at the shore's heart, a towering figure in a green kimono edged with gold, his long hair streaming in the breeze. His nodachi gleamed, its blade a silver arc longer than most men's reach. His blue eyes glinted with sharp amusement as he called out, "Late, Musashi." "And armed with a paddle?" The crowd tittered, a nervous edge to their laughter. Musashi's face remained still, his voice cutting through the air like a blade. "Steel or wood, it's the hand that matters." The duel began in silence, a held breath. Kojiro shifted, his nodachi rising, its tip tracing a slow circle. Musashi planted his feet wide, the bokken angled low, his body a coiled spring. The waves crashed, a gull cried, and then Kojiro struck, a sudden lunge, the nodachi slashing down in a diagonal arc, fast as lightning. The crowd gasped, a collective jolt, as Musashi twisted left, the steel missing his shoulder by a hair's breadth. The blade bit into the pebbles, scattering them with a sharp crack. Kojiro pivoted, his recovery seamless, the nodachi whipping around in a horizontal sweep. Musashi ducked, the air humming above his head, and sprang forward, the bokken darting out. It struck Kojiro's guard, a loud thwack of wood on steel, and the crowd flinched, a ripple of shock passing through them. Kojiro's eyes narrowed, his smirk gone, and he pressed the attack, the nodachi slicing in tight, controlled arcs. Each swing was a death sentence, its reach a wall of gleaming danger. Musashi danced with it, his footwork precise, left, right, a half step back, his sandals grinding the pebbles into dust. The bokken flashed, parrying a thrust with a jarring clack, then snapping toward Kojiro's wrist. The samurai grunted, pulling back, his long blade forcing distance. The crowd leaned in, their breaths shallow, a woman clutching her sleeve, a samurai's hand tightening on his own hilt. "He's too fast," someone whispered. "No, Kojiro's got him," another hissed. The fight became a rhythm, Kojiro's nodachi carving wide, powerful strokes, Musashi weaving through them, the bokken a blur of counters. A downward slash, Musashi sidestepped, the blade's wind tugging his kimono. A thrust, Musashi deflected, wood scraping steel with a shrill screech. He lunged, feinting high, then struck low, the bokken cracking against Kojiro's knee. The samurai staggered, a rare falter, and the crowd's murmur swelled, half awe, half disbelief. Kojiro roared, his nodachi rising for a crushing overhead blow, its shadow stretching across the shore. Musashi saw the weight shift, the split-second overreach. He surged forward, inside the blade's arc, the bokken thrusting up like a spear. It struck Kojiro's chest with a dull thud, the force driving the air from his lungs. Kojiro stumbled, feet slipping, and crashed to the ground, the nodachi spinning free, landing with a soft clink on the pebbles. Silence fell, heavy and absolute. The crowd stood frozen, eyes wide, mouths agape. A child's gasp broke the stillness, then a man's choked, "He's down!" Kojiro lay sprawled, chest heaving, the great nodachi useless beside him. Musashi lowered his bokken, his breath steady, his gaze unwavering. Slowly Kojiro rose, his face a mask of pale fury, and limped away, the crowd parting in stunned reverence. The waves rolled in, a gentle counterpoint to the battle's end. Musashi stood alone, the bokken scarred but unbroken, the tension draining into the sea's embrace. The crowd dispersed, their whispers fading, leaving only the sound of water and the echo of a duel that would live forever. The pebbles of Ganryujima Island crunched underfoot as the last of the onlookers drifted away, their voices fading into the sea's steady murmur. Miyamoto Musashi stood alone, the ore-carved bokken still warm in his calloused hands, its rough wood marked by the duel's intensity. The sun dipped toward the horizon, casting a golden sheen across the water, the air thick with the briny scent of the tide and the faint tang of sweat. Sasaki Kojiro's retreating figure had vanished into the mist, his nodachi abandoned on the shore, a silent testament to Musashi's triumph. The crowd's stunned silence lingered, a heavy cloak that settled over the island, broken only by the rhythmic crash of waves. Word spread like wildfire across Japan. In coastal villages, fishermen gathered around flickering lanterns, their nets piled at their feet, murmuring about the ronin who felled Kojiro with a wooden oar. Thanks for watching. For more on the story of Musashi, head over to the Slumbering Times, and while you're there, please consider subscribing. Thank you. Miyamoto Musashi stood alone, the ore-carved bokken still warm in his calloused hands, its rough wood marked by the duel's intensity. The sun dipped toward the horizon, casting a golden sheen across the water, the air thick with the briny scent of the tide and the faint tang of sweat. Sasaki Kojiro's retreating figure had vanished into the mist, his nodachi abandoned on the shore, a silent testament to Musashi's triumph. The crowd's stunned silence lingered, a heavy cloak that settled over the island, broken only by the rhythmic crash of waves. Word spread like wildfire across Japan. In coastal villages, fishermen gathered around flickering lanterns, their nets piled at their feet, murmuring about the ronin who felled Kojiro with a wooden oar. "He didn't even use a real sword," one said, shaking his head, the disbelief etched into his weathered face. In Kyoto, merchants paused mid-haggle, their voices dropping to hushed tones as they recounted the tale. "Kojiro, unbeatable Kojiro, beaten by a stick," a silk trader whispered, his fingers pausing over a bolt of fabric. The shock rippled outward, a wave that carried disbelief and awe. Samurai in Edo tightened their grips on their katanas, their honor pricked by the thought of a wanderer outsmarting tradition. "A fluke," one muttered, but his companion shook his head. "No skill, pure, raw skill." Rumors twisted the story with each retelling. Some claimed Musashi had carved the oar mid-duel, a feat of speed and madness. Others swore the bokken glowed with some mystical power. a tale that spread to rural taverns. A young boy in a fishing village near Osaka ran through the streets shouting, "He turned the sea against Kojiro," a fanciful embellishment that drew laughter and wide eyes. The truth, Musashi's late arrival, his unorthodox weapon, his precise strike, faded beneath the legend, each version growing wilder, more colorful. By the time the tale reached the northern provinces, it was said he'd fought a dozen men, not one. The oar, a magical staff that bent steel. Musashi's reputation soared, a rising tide that lifted him from a mere ronin to a name whispered with reverence. In dojos across the land, instructors adjusted their teachings, muttering about the oar technique as a cautionary tale. A traveling monk, his robes patched and grey, spoke of Musashi in a temple courtyard, his voice low. "He's no ordinary swordsman. His mind is his blade." Samurai sought him out, some to challenge, others to learn, their letters piling up at inns where he rested. A lord in Osaka sent an envoy with an offer of service, the man bowing deeply. "Your name carries weight now," the envoy said, presenting a sealed scroll. Musashi accepted it with a nod, but his feet itched to move on, the weight of fame an unfamiliar burden. As he sailed back to the mainland, the sea's gentle rocking lulled him into thought. The skiff creaked under his weight, the oar dipping into the water with a soft splash, the salt air cooling his brow. He turned the bokken over in his hands, its scars a map of the duel. Kojiro's missed strikes, his own decisive blow. The victory replayed in his mind, the Nodachi's whistle, the crowd's gasp, the thud of Kojiro's fall. It was skill, yes, but also timing. Arriving late had thrown Kojiro off, a lesson from his youth under Munisai's stern tutelage. Yet the ease of it gnawed at him. Kojiro's pride had been his downfall, a mirror Musashi feared reflecting his own. He thought of the onlookers, their shock, their awe, and felt a pang of isolation. The duel had elevated him, but at what cost? The bokken's weight seemed heavier now, not from the wood, but from the expectations it carried. Dorinbo's words from years ago surfaced, "Flow like a river." Musashi exhaled, letting the tension slip away with the tide. Victory was not the end, but a step toward understanding, toward a balance beyond the blade. In a small port town, he stopped at an inn, the wooden floor creaking under his sandals. The room was simple, tatami mats, a low table, a lantern casting a warm glow. Travelers gathered, their voices a soft buzz, and Musashi listened as they spoke of him. "He's a ghost with that oar," one said, a trader with a crooked nose. "No, a demon," another countered, a fisherman with calloused hands. Musashi sipped tea, its bitter taste grounding him, and said nothing. The rumors amused him, magical oars, sea spirits, but they also weighed on his spirit. Fame was a double-edged sword, cutting deeper than any Nodachi. He retreated to the inn's porch as night fell, the sky a deep indigo pierced by stars. The sea stretched out, its surface a mirror for the lantern light, the waves a gentle lullaby. Musashi leaned against a post, the bokken resting beside him, its wood cool to the touch. He thought of Takezo, his old rival turned ally, whose grin he'd seen on Ganryujima's shore. Of Yuki, the archer whose laughter had lightened his path. Of Jiro, the boatmaker whose gruff aid had carried him to victory. Their faces flickered in his mind, a tether to the human world beyond the sword. The duel had changed him, not just in skill, but in soul. He saw the pride in Kojiro's eyes, the arrogance that had faltered, and wondered if his own path might lead to the same pitfall. Munisai's lessons, read your opponent, anticipate their move, had saved him, but Dorinbo's quiet wisdom now guided his reflection. A blade finds its path in stillness. Nagaoka Sado had echoed on that cliff. Musashi closed his eyes, letting the sea's rhythm wash over him, a soothing balm against the day's intensity. The bokken's scars told a story, but it was the silence that taught him its meaning. As the stars brightened, Musashi lay on the porch's mat, the lantern's glow fading to a soft flicker. The inn's wooden walls creaked gently, the sea's song a constant companion. He tucked the bokken under his arm, its weight a familiar comfort, and let his thoughts drift. Duels won, lessons learned, a life unfolding. The tension of the day melted away, his breath slowing, his body sinking into rest as the night embraced him, dreams of rippling water and steady steel guiding him into sleep. The sea's lullaby had long faded from Miyamoto Musashi's ears as he stepped away from the shores of Ganryujima in 1612. The weight of his oar bokken still etched into his palms from that fateful duel with Sasaki Kojiro. His sandals pressed into the rocky mainland, the sharp tang of brine giving way to the grounding scent of pine as he ventured inward. Time flowed like a river, and by the early 1620s, his path had led him to Kumamoto, a bustling domain in southern Japan under the stewardship of Lord Hosokawa. The castle loomed ahead, its grey stone walls rising sturdy and weathered, a silent sentinel over the endless rice paddies that gleamed like liquid gold beneath the rising sun. The air was thick with the warm aroma of polished wood from the castle's beams, interwoven with the faint spice of incense curling from a modest shrine nestled within its grounds. From the ramparts, the soft clink of armored guards patrolling blended with the distant rhythm of wooden practice swords clashing below, a heartbeat of discipline pulsing through the earth. Musashi, now in his 30s, bore the marks of his journey. His once youthful frame had hardened, lean muscle taut beneath a weathered brown kimono, patched yet meticulously maintained. Faint lines traced his sun-darkened face, and his steady, piercing gaze spoke of battle survived and wisdom earned. At his side hung his dual swords, a katana and wakizashi, their steel dulled by countless strikes, yet honed with a craftsman's care. Life in Kumamoto settled into a cadence of rigor and reflection. His mornings unfolded on the training grounds, where the air buzzed with the thud of bokken against wood, and the earthy musk of sweat-soaked soil clung to his sandals. The trainees moved in disciplined arcs, their breaths sharp and focused, while Musashi guided them with a quiet authority that needed no raised voice. Among them was Terao Magonojo, a young disciple in his 20s whose quiet intensity mirrored his master's. Dressed in simple brown robes faded at the knees, his short black hair tied back neatly, Terao's dark eyes tracked Musashi's every motion with a blend of reverence and determination. One crisp morning, as the sun cast long shadows across the packed dirt, their bokken met in a sharp crack that echoed through the grounds. Terao paused, wiping sweat from his brow, his voice steady but probing. "You're holding back," he said. Musashi's lips curved into a faint grin, the barest flicker of warmth in his stoic demeanor. "Save your strength for the real fight," he replied, his tone low and measured. Terao nodded, adjusting his stance, and the sparring resumed, the rhythm of wood on wood, a steady hymn beneath the climbing sun. Musashi's reputation rippled beyond the castle walls, drawing curious souls to Kumamoto. A merchant named Kenji arrived one day, a stout figure with a graying beard and a weathered brown cloak dusted from the road. His voice boomed with the confidence of a man who thrived on trade. "I've brought steel from Osaka," he declared, unloading a crate of blades that glinted in the midday light. "Heard you're the man to test them." Musashi lifted a katana, its edge catching the sun, and swung it through the air with a soft whoosh. He weighed it in his hands, then handed it back. "Good weight," he said simply. "But it's the hand, not the steel, that wins." Kenji's laughter rumbled like distant thunder. "Fair enough, I'll stick to coins." Their exchanges brought a rare lightness to the training sessions, the merchant's pragmatic wit a counterpoint to the grind of martial practice. Not all visitors came with wares. One afternoon, a lean traveler named Ryo appeared, his sharp features framed by a grey tunic patched from countless miles. His voice carried an urgent edge as he knelt before Musashi, tracing a crude map in the dirt. "Bandits in the hills," he said, pointing to a jagged line. "They're raiding villages." Musashi studied the sketch, then gathered Terao and a handful of guards. The trek through the forest was a tense march, the air heavy with pine and the rustle of leaves beneath their feet. They reached the camp at dusk, a ramshackle cluster of tents aglow with flickering fires. Musashi moved like a shadow, his bokken striking with surgical precision. Two bandits disarmed before their blades could clear their sheaths. The skirmish ended swiftly, the guards binding the rest, and Ryo offered a grateful nod. "You've a calm hand," he said. Musashi shrugged, brushing dirt from his kimono. "Calm saves lives." When the dust of combat settled, Musashi sought solace in the castle's garden. Cherry blossoms drifted down like whispers, their soft pink petals brushing the ground, their faint sweetness carried on the breeze. He sat by a koi pond, its surface rippling with golden flecks as fish darted beneath, and took up a brush. His strokes were slow and deliberate, ink bleeding into rice paper to form shrike perched on a withered branch, a lone bird on a stark limb, its simplicity a mirror to his thoughts. From the hall, the gentle hum of a koto player's strings wove through the air, a soothing thread that tethered him to the moment. Terao often joined him here, sitting in companionable silence, his steady presence a quiet anchor. One evening, as the sun dipped low and painted the sky in hues of amber, Nagaoka Sado approached. Lord Hosokawa's trusted vassal moved with a measured grace, his grey silk robes adorned with golden stitching, his greying hair bound neatly. "Your blade is sharp," he said, his voice calm yet probing. "But what of your mind?" Musashi set his brush aside, the ink still glistening on the paper. "It seeks balance," he replied. Sado's lips twitched in a rare smile, a glimmer of humor breaking his solemnity. "Then write it down. Words last longer than steel." The words lingered, a seed taking root, and Musashi began to scratch notes on rice paper, the sharp scent of ink mingling with the blossom's fading perfume. Night deepened around the garden, the air cooling against his skin as he leaned against a stone bench. The koi pond's ripples slowed, reflecting a crescent moon, and the koto's final note dissolved into silence. The day's trials of steel and brush wove together in his mind, a tapestry of discipline tempered by art. Musashi closed his eyes, the castle's heartbeat fading into the distance, his thoughts drifting toward a quiet resolve that would one day shape his legacy. The garden's quiet lingered as Miyamoto Musashi's days in Kumamoto stretched into the late 1630s, the castle's stone walls standing firm against the horizon. The rice paddies beyond shimmered under a pale afternoon sun, their green expanse a steady presence. Inside his quarters, the air held the sharp tang of ink, a scent that grew stronger with each scroll he filled, their edges curling slightly from fresh writings. The training grounds, once alive with the clash of bokken, had grown quieter, his lessons now a blend of swordplay and thought, the soft scratch of a quill replacing the sharp thud of wood. One afternoon, Kumoi stepped into the garden, her crimson silk kimono rustling with each deliberate step. Her long black hair was pinned with a delicate silver hairpin, and her warm brown eyes carried a gentle curiosity as she approached Musashi, who sat by the koi pond. "A swordsman turned painter?" she teased, her voice light with a hint of laughter, peering at the rice paper where his brush had traced bold yet restrained strokes. Musashi looked up, his ink-stained hands pausing mid-motion, a faint smile tugging at his lips. "The brush has its own fight," he said, his tone reflecting a quiet pride. She settled beside him on the stone bench, her kimono's fabric brushing his arm, and shared tales of distant cities, markets buzzing with merchants, rivers reflecting lantern light. Her stories stirred a longing in him, a reminder of the world he'd left behind, and he listened, the pond's ripples mirroring the calm in his eyes. Terao Magonojo remained a constant presence, his brown robes now marked by years of training, the fabric worn thin at the elbows. One evening, as the sun dipped low, casting long shadows across the garden, he joined Musashi during a practice session. Terao's bokken met Musashi's with a sharp clack, and he paused, wiping sweat from his brow. "Master, why two swords?" he asked, his dark eyes searching for understanding. Musashi swung both katana and wakizashi in a fluid arc, the steel singing through the air. "One for defense, one for the strike," he explained. "Balance is everything, strength and patience together." Terao nodded, mimicking the move with a focused intensity, and Musashi felt a quiet swell of pride in his disciples' progress, the garden's peace wrapping around them like a soft cloak. Nagaoka Sado, Lord Hosokawa's wise vassal, visited often, his grey silk robes with golden stitching flowing as he moved. One crisp morning, he brought a stack of fresh rice paper, his greying hair neatly bound. "Your thoughts deserve more," he said, his voice steady and thoughtful. "Write them down." Musashi took the paper, and over the following weeks he crafted Hyoho Sanju Go, a treatise on strategy, the ink's sharp scent filling the room as he worked. Sado watched from a corner, nodding approval. "Words can cut deeper than any blade," he remarked with a wry smile, his humor a gentle nudge. The process stretched into months, each page a step toward clarity. The quills scratch a rhythm against the castle's quiet hum. A new figure, Kenta, a young scribe with a reserved demeanor, joined Musashi's circle. His black hair was tied with a simple cord, his grey tunic plain but clean, his hands steady as he copied Musashi's writings. One day, as they sat by a low table, Kenta set down his brush and said, "Your words are heavy with meaning." Musashi nodded, his own hands pausing over a scroll. "They carry a lifetime," he replied, a hint of weariness in his voice. Kenta's diligence brought order to Musashi's scattered notes, their partnership deepening into a quiet trust that steadied the older man's mind. One morning, a messenger arrived with news of a rival dojo in a nearby town challenging Musashi's Niton Ichiryu style. He and Terao set out, the road dusty underfoot, the air thick with the scent of wild grass and the distant bleat of goats. The dojo was modest, its walls lined with faded scrolls, the room filled with the musty smell of old paper and the tension of a gathered crowd. The leader, Taro, a stocky man with a scarred cheek and a dark blue kimono, faced Musashi, his katana drawn. "Your style is a passing fad," Taro sneered, his voice rough. Musashi met him with a calm stance, his dual blades flashing in a quick draw. The fight was brief. Taro lunged with an aggressive overhead swing, but Musashi sidestepped, his katana blocking with a solid clank, then tapped Taro's shoulder with his wakizashi, the contact light but firm, ending the bout. The onlookers clapped, their respect a quiet wave, and Musashi bowed slightly. "Your effort sharpens us all," he said, his humility earning nods. Back in Kumamoto, Kumoi returned, her presence a warm interruption to his routine. "You've softened, swordsman," she said, her laugh soft as she sat by the pond, her kimono's crimson folds pooling around her. Musashi set down his brush, the ink still wet. "Age teaches what steel cannot," he replied, his tone reflective. Her tales of a festival, dancers in bright robes, drums beating a steady rhythm, inspired a new painting, its colors bold yet controlled, the brush strokes a dance of memory. The garden's peace wrapped around them, the koi pond's ripples a mirror to his thoughts, her laughter a gentle echo in the stillness. As night fell, Musashi sat by the pond, the water reflecting the amber sky above. The koto's hum had faded, leaving only the soft rustle of leaves in the breeze. He traced the ink stains on his hands, feeling a quiet pride in the day's work. Battles fought, lessons shared, art created. Terao's dedication, Kenta's quiet support, Kumoi's warmth, and Sado's guidance wove a tapestry of his later years. The garden's stillness lulled his mind, his breath slowing as he rested against the stone bench, the night air cool against his skin, his reflections guiding him toward a peaceful rest. As the years rolled into the early 1640s, Miyamoto Musashi's footsteps grew slower with each passing season. The castle's stone walls, once a bastion of discipline, now felt like a distant echo of his younger days. The rice paddies beyond stretching wide under a sky, often clouded with the promise of rain. The air carried the faint, earthy scent of damp soil from the fields, mingling with the sharp tang of ink that clung to his quarters, where stacks of rice paper bore the weight of his thoughts. The training grounds, once alive with the clash of bokken, had quieted, his lessons now rare as his body creaked with age. At 60, his lean frame bore the marks of a lifetime, faint scars crisscrossing his hands, his graying black hair loose and streaked with silver, his hazel eyes clouded yet sharp with wisdom. Terao Magonojo, now in his late 30s, remained a steadfast presence, his brown robes worn thin from years of service, his short black hair tied back with a simple cord. His dark eyes, once wide with youthful awe, now held a steady respect as he assisted Musashi in the mornings. One day, as they sat by a low table, Terao handed him a cup of green tea, its bitter aroma rising in the cool air. "Your hands still move like the wind," he said, a hint of admiration in his voice. Musashi took the cup, his fingers trembling slightly as he sipped. "The wind slows with time," he replied, a faint smile creasing his weathered face. "But the mind endures." Terao nodded, setting out fresh paper, their routine a quiet dance of mutual support. News from beyond the castle walls reached Musashi through a steady stream of visitors. A merchant named Hiroshi, a stocky man with a weathered face and a brown cloak patched from travel, arrived with tales from Edo. "Your name's in every dojo," he said, unloading a sack of rice. "They call you the Ore Master now." Musashi chuckled, the sound rough but warm. "An ore was just wood," he said, waving a hand dismissively. "Skill made it more." Hiroshi grinned, setting the rice down. "Still, it's a story that sells. Keeps my trade brisk." The merchant's visits brought a practical link to the outside world, his blunt humor a welcome break from Musashi's introspection. One afternoon, a young warrior named Kenji sought Musashi out, his black hair tied with a red cord, his grey tunic marked by a fresh scar across his arm. His voice carried a nervous edge as he knelt. "I've heard of your duels," he said. "Teach me to fight like you." Musashi studied him, noting the boy's eager grip on a practice sword. "Fighting is only part," he said, his tone gentle. "Living with it matters more." He spent the day guiding Kenji through basic stances, the thud of wood on wood a soft rhythm, his own movements slow but precise, teaching patience over power. The castle's garden remained his sanctuary, the cherry blossoms now sparse, their petals falling with a gentle rustle, the air tinged with their fading sweetness. Musashi often sat by the koi pond, its surface rippling with golden flecks as fish darted beneath. The water's soft lap, a constant companion. One evening, as the sun dipped low, Kumoi appeared, her crimson silk kimono rustling as she approached. Her long black hair was pinned with a silver hairpin, her warm brown eyes softening at the sight of him. "You've grown quieter," she said, her voice a gentle tease, settling beside him. Musashi set down his brush, the ink still wet on a sketch of a lone tree. "The sword taught me noise," he replied. "The brush teaches silence." Kumoi leaned closer, her kimono brushing his arm, and shared tales of a festival in a distant town, dancers in bright robes, drums beating a steady pulse. "Life moves on," she said, her fingers tracing the bench's edge. Musashi listened, the memories stirring a flicker of nostalgia, his hand resting near hers, the contact a quiet comfort. "It does," he agreed, his voice low. "And I've learned to watch it pass." Her presence brought a warmth to his days, a reminder of connections beyond the blade. Nagaoka Sado, Lord Hosokawa's vassal, visited as the weeks turned cooler, his grey silk robes with golden stitching flowing with each step, his greying hair neatly bound. One morning, he brought a small chest of writing tools, his calm voice breaking the silence. "Your lessons should live beyond you," he said, opening the lid to reveal brushes and ink. Musashi took a brush, its handle smooth in his grip, and nodded. "Words can guide where swords cannot," he replied. Over days he began the Book of Five Rings, the quills scratch a steady sound against the paper. Sado watched, his smile faint. "A master's true strength," he murmured, leaving Musashi to his work. As autumn deepened, the garden's leaves turned a muted gold, their rustle a soft counterpoint to the pond's ripples. Musashi sat with Kenta, a young scribe with a reserved air, his black hair tied with a cord, his grey tunic clean despite long hours. Kenta copied Musashi's writings, his hands steady. "These words carry weight," he said one day, pausing to dip his brush. Musashi looked up, his eyes tired but clear. "They hold a life," he answered. Their collaboration brought order to his thoughts, Kenta's quiet presence a steady anchor. The garden's gentle ripples faded as Miyamoto Musashi's journey drew toward its close in the spring of 1645. At 61, his steps had grown slow, the castle's stone walls of Kumamoto, a distant memory as he sought solitude in Regando Cave, a rugged sanctuary carved into a cliffside overlooking a misty valley. The air inside was cool and still, carrying the deep, grounding scent of pine needles and the damp richness of moss-covered stone. A single oil lamp flickered against the cave's rough walls, its golden light dancing on the uneven surface, casting shadows that seemed to hold the weight of his years. Outside, a waterfall's steady hum blended with the soft rustle of leaves, stirred by a gentle breeze, a natural symphony that filled the silence. His simple bedding, a straw mat in muted brown and a worn blanket in deep red, lay against the wall, a humble testament to a life stripped to its essence, the faint scent of ink from his writing tools lingering like a quiet prayer. Terao Magonoho, now a seasoned swordsman in his late 30s, visited often, his brown robes faded from years of loyalty, his short black hair tied with a worn cord. His dark eyes, once bright with youthful zeal, now reflected a deep reverence as he knelt beside Musashi. One afternoon, as the lamp's light wavered, Terao placed a fresh quill and ink pot on the mat. "Your words guide us still," he said, his voice low and steady. Musashi took the quill, his trembling hands tracing its feather, the weight of his legacy settling into his bones. "They are my final gift," he replied, his tone heavy with purpose. Terao nodded, his presence a silent pillar, and sat in quiet companionship as Musashi wrote. Iori, Musashi's adopted son, a thoughtful young man in his 20s with gentle grey eyes and black hair tied with a blue cord, joined them as the days shortened. His plain grey tunic bore the marks of his own labours, and his attentive gaze followed Musashi's every move. One evening, as the waterfall's song grew softer, Iori asked, "What do these writings mean, father?" Musashi paused, his ink-stained fingers resting on the paper. "They are the truth of a life. Struggle, balance, acceptance," he said, his voice a whisper of wisdom. Iori's nod was slow, his respect a bridge between generations, and he stayed close, a quiet strength in the cave's dimness. Kumoi, the courtesan whose visits had once brightened the garden, returned in the cave's twilight. Her crimson silk kimono rustled as she entered, her long black hair pinned with a silver hairpin, her warm brown eyes glistening with unshed tears. She knelt beside him, her hands folding into her lap. "You've given so much," she said, her voice breaking slightly. Musashi turned to her, his face lined with the weight of years, a faint smile softening his features. "And you've given me peace," he answered, his hand brushing hers briefly, the touch a final thread of their shared past. She stayed until dusk, her tales of distant festivals a last gift, her departure leaving a hollow echo in the cave. Musashi's days were spent refining the Book of Five Rings and Dokudo. The quills scratch a steady heartbeat against the silence. The ink's sharp scent filled the space, each stroke a distillation of his life. Duels with Arima, the Yoshioka school, Kojiro, and the quiet moments with Terao, Yori, and Kumoi. He wrote of the five elements: earth, water, fire, wind, void, his hand moving with a precision that belied his frailty. "Accept everything just the way it is," he inscribed, the words a mantra that steadied his breath. Terao and Iori listened, their faces illuminated by the lamp's glow, the waterfalls hum a backdrop to his teachings, their presence a living testament to his influence. One night, as the cave grew colder, a memory surfaced, of the stream in Miyamoto where he'd sat after his first victory, the water's gurgle a balm to his young heart. He saw Munisai's scarred face, Dorinbo's gentle smile, Takezo's teasing grin, and the faces of those he'd met, Hana, Yuki, Jiro, each a piece of the mosaic that had shaped him. The victories, the art, the writings, they were not ends, but a journey toward understanding. His hands, once swift with a blade, now trembled with the quill, yet the strength within them remained. He penned the final lines of Dokudo. "Think lightly of yourself and deeply of the world," the ink drying as the lamp's flame flickered lower. The cave's stillness deepened, the waterfall's song a gentle lullaby that wrapped around him. Musashi lay on the mat, the red blanket pulled close, the cool stone beneath a grounding force. He gazed at the cave's ceiling, the shadows shifting like memories, steel clashing, brushes gliding, faces fading into the past. His breath slowed, each inhale a release, each exhale a surrender. Terao and Iori sat nearby, their quiet presence a final comfort, the lamp's light dimming to a soft ember. Kumoi's warmth lingered in his mind, a beacon in the gathering dark. As the night deepened, the waterfall's hum grew distant, the leaves rustle a whisper of farewell. Musashi's hazel eyes closed, his face serene, the weight of a lifetime lifting like mist from the valley. His dreams carried the clack of bokken, the flow of ink, the laughter of friends, a profound tapestry of a great man's soul. The cave embraced him, the silence a sacred shroud, leaving listeners moved by the quiet majesty of his end, a legend resting in peace.